Okay.
All right, welcome everyone. It's noon, so we can go ahead and get started. So welcome to the NIH Directors Pioneer Award webinar for RFA RM-27-001. The panelists for today will be Dr. Trish Lebowski and me as well, Becky Miller. We are both from the Office of Strategic Coordination in the Office of the NIH Director. And if you have any questions, please, we do ask you to go to our website at commonfund.nih.gov/pioneer. It has so many resources on there. It's incredible. We have FAQs. We'll be posting the webinar, the recording, and the slides there. It has an application guide that guides you through the process of applying and helps guide you through the different essays, the different components. So we do ask that you go to our website because there are a lot of resources that we've created for you, and it'll help answer a lot of the questions that we'll probably get today. If you have questions that don't get answered during the webinar, or you have more specific questions that maybe are a bit more delicate or has some sensitive information, we ask you to please reach out to us at pioneerawards@mail.nih.gov. Send them in that way, and Trish will answer them for you. All right. Just before we get started, I wanted to give you a little information about the NIH Common Fund, which is run by our office, the Office of Strategic Coordination. So the Common Fund, its mission is to support bold scientific programs that help catalyze discovery across all biomedical and behavioral research. So we bring together investigators and multiple NIH institute centers and offices to come together to collaborate on innovative research to address high priority challenges for the NIH as a whole and also make a broader impact in the scientific community. So our programs, they must have these 5 different criteria. The programs must be synergistic, transformative, novel, catalytic, and goal-driven. So we're constantly creating programs, and then other ones are being sunsetted. But please go to our website at commonfund.nih.gov to look at what programs are available now. There may be funding opportunities that are available for you to apply to. And depending on what your research area is, there may or may not be programs of relevance to you. But one thing to note is that all of our Common Fund programs are very goal-driven, and they have developed resources, or they have data sets that are accessible to you. They build capabilities like building actual facilities. So take a look at our website, see if there's anything there that may be of use to you or that may help you with kind of your future research goals. I really do highly recommend that. But we are here to talk about one Common Fund program in particular, and that is the High Risk, High Reward Research Program. So this is composed of 4 awards, 4 NIH Directors Awards: the Pioneer Award, the New Innovator Award, the Transformative Research Award, and the Early Independence Award. So these 4 awards support outstanding scientists at all career stages proposing outstanding high-risk, high-impact research. We really try to have annual funding opportunities. So we're on an annual cycle, so we try to release these funding opportunities in the spring with receipt dates typically in late summer or early fall. But we're really looking for your high-risk, high-impact ideas for this program. We do not require preliminary data or a detailed experimental plan. And we are sincere when we say that. We do not require the preliminary data, but if you do include it, it is welcome, but it is not an expectation. And we welcome any topic relevant to the NIH mission. So it could be behavioral, social, biomedical, applied, formal sciences, basic, translational, clinical. We really do accept any research that is relevant to the NIH mission. And we also encourage applications from the full spectrum of eligible institutions. So whether you're research intensive or maybe you're a less research intensive institution, as long as you're eligible for NIH funding, then we welcome applications from you. And before we go on, I do want to acknowledge that this program is a very large program that requires a lot of lifting from multiple people, and we do have a working group that helps us run and manage this program. And our working group consists of members from all the NIH institutes and centers. So we do welcome any topic relevant to the NIH mission, and we have staff representing those different institutes and centers also helping us manage this award. With that, I'm going to turn this over to Trish, and I will ask you to please put your questions in the Q&A box. If you go up to the top of the screen, you have a little 3 dots and says more. If you click on that, there should be a Q&A box that you can open. Please reserve the chat for more questions about like if you're having technical difficulties or things like that, but questions go into the Q&A box. All right, Trish.
Thanks, Becky. Yes, I put a little message in each of the boxes to try to help out with that, but it is a challenge. So we know it can be hard to find. We've heard from people who are on their phones and they have a hard time finding the Q&A box. I don't know, but that'll help us stay organized so that we can get to everything. Okay, so again, my name is Trish Lebowski. I am the program officer for the Pioneer applications, amongst other things, but that's my role here today and on this program. So I want to talk to you about the Pioneer Award. Again, it's part of our high-risk, high-reward research program, and it was designed to support individual scientists with outstanding records of creativity who are proposing pioneering approaches to major challenges in biomedical and behavioral research. This was the first award that was started back in 2004, and it was started based on feedback from the extramural community, from you all, about how we need to have a place at NIH where we can support high-risk, high-reward research. So this is for a single PI application only. You cannot have MPIs. You can have key personnel, collaborators, etc., but you don't need all their information in the application. We'll get to that. But it's really very much about the person, you, who is applying. This is open to all career stages, unlike some of our other awards. And one of the key review criteria is you must be proposing a new research direction for you, your laboratory. And this is something that you want to spend time on in the essay because the reviewers need to evaluate this. The application requires 3 letters of reference, and we'll talk about details around them in a little bit. And you're required to commit a major portion of your research effort, so more than 51% for the first 3 years of the award. It tapers down after that. These cannot be renewed, and we know that, and we understand that the applicant will need to be trying to get funds to replace this, so the amount tapers down. The awards have a capped budget. It's fixed at $700,000 per year for 5 years. That's direct costs. If an award's to be made, of course, indirect costs are added. So the next slide, this is trying to compare, you're probably all used to R01s, compare what an R01 application is, how it's different than a DP1 application. So the specific aims page, obviously that's required for an R01. We do not use one for the DP1. Do not submit one. That can create a problem. And if you submit extra documents, that can result in your application being administratively withdrawn. So do not include it. The research strategy for an R01, it's a 12-page document that it includes detailed experimental plans and preliminary data. For the DP1, it is a 5-page essay, so that's pretty small. Again, we'll talk about the details of that in a later slide. BioSketch. For the R01, you would include a biosketch for not just you as the PI, but all senior or key personnel. But for the DP1, no, again, it's just you, the single PI who's applying. Bibliography, for the R01, it's required. For the DP1, you cannot upload a bibliography. Again, if you do, your application could be withdrawn. So do not use the bibliography. Instead, you're going to include the fewer essential references in the essay portion of the application. For the budget, an R01, you need details. They're required, especially for budgets that are over the modular cutoff of 250K in direct costs. But for the DP1, it's completely different. There's no detailed budget accepted. So you're going to indicate only a total 3.5 million. If there is an award to be made later, the indirects will be added later. It's likely that your institution will have a problem with this. The people helping you submit will question this. So I promise you that's all the information we want. We spell it out really clearly in the funding opportunity. So they may have you submit a detailed budget to them, to your offices that want to know what you're going to use it for, but do not add it to your DP1 application. Letters of support, right? Different than letters of reference. Letters of support are encouraged for an R01, and these are the letters that state that a collaborator is going to help you by supplying reagents or technologies or whatever. Letters of support are not allowed for the DP1 application. So you can have those collaborations that you might need for the science. You simply talk about them in the essay, list who they are and where they are, the individuals, but you cannot have letters from them. The research effort is also different. For an R01, it depends on the project. It depends on what you're doing and how big the project is and how much effort it will take. But for a DP1, it's different. It's supposed to be your major research effort for those years. So we require at least 51% effort for the first 3 years of the project. And again, you want to state that in the essay. Letters of reference, remember, these are completely different than letters of support. They're not allowed for an R01, but for the DP1, they are required. And they're a major part of the review. They're something that reviewers look at very closely. And we'll cover that in a little more detail in a couple minutes. So the next slide. So the Pioneer application, unless there's something that's specifically mentioned or called out in the funding opportunity, you follow the standard instructions in the SF424 application guide. That means that if appropriate for the science, for the project that you're proposing, you're going to want to complete the vertebrate animal section or the human subject section, again, only if it's appropriate for the science. You're going to want to include your authentication of key biological and or chemical resources, etc. Remember, these documents do not drive the priority scores, but they're important and the reviewers will be looking for them. And if they're missing, reviewers note that and it's not a positive thing. So I get questions all the time, how much detail, cue back, Becky, thank you. I get questions all the time, well, how detailed should this be? Because we're not submitting a detailed experimental plan. So reviewers are trained exhaustively over that. So you complete these forms as best you can. The reviewers are trained to keep in mind that you may not have worked out all these details yet, so you use your best guess. Do not use this as a substitute for the research strategy section where you put in exhaustive details, but you want numbers especially for animals and human subjects, exclusion, inclusion criteria, etc. So the essentials should be there. On the next slide. So the research strategy essay for the Pioneer, again, it's only 5 pages. So we tell you precisely to use the following headings or subsections. So please use them. You don't have to use the bullets, but you have to use the headings. So you're going to specify the project science areas. It's one-digit code and then a three-letter abbreviation for primary and secondary areas that describe your research. Use your best guess. We know there's only 8 of these, and they're not probably precise enough, but this is what we have. These are used only for reviewer assignments. They're not used for funding decisions or priorities. You need a project title. It should be a descriptive title of your proposed project. And then you want a project description. This is likely to be a bit longer. You want to describe the scientific importance of the topic, your overall innovative approach that you're going to take. Preliminary data are not required, but they're accepted. And if you include them, they will be evaluated by the reviewers. We recommend you state directly that in order to comply with the funding opportunity, a detailed and extensive experimental plan is not being provided. Remind reviewers, again, they're trained, but remind them that that's why you're not including it. However, you do need to provide sufficient evidence that your proposal has been deeply thought through. You have a plan, and it will be pursued in a robust and rigorous manner. And you can do that throughout by being rigorous in your presentation of the background of the area and etc. The next heading is the PI's innovativeness. So you want to provide evidence of a history of high innovation. I'm asked all the time whether your career stage matters for this. And no, we don't have any specific cutoffs, but you need to have that history of high innovation. So think about that if you're trying to decide whether or not this is the right initiative for you. Change in research direction. Again, I mentioned this earlier. It is really critical. It is basically 1/3 of the review criteria. Explain to reviewers how the proposed project is a change in your research direction. This is a very difficult thing to define. I can't really define it for you. You're going to need to rationalize it and convince those reviewers, okay? Spend some time on this because, again, it's 1/3 of the criteria. So it's very, very important. But if reviewers feel that this is a logical extension of what you've been doing in your lab, in your scientific career for the past however many years, they're not going to see that it's a change. If you're if you're adding some novel technology, that's great. But if you're answering the same research questions you were answering previously, they will not view that as a change in research direction. So really take some time on this. Okay, suitability for a Pioneer Award program. So describe why your proposal is HRHR, high risk, high reward, rather than more suitable for a traditional R01. And it can't just be that you don't have preliminary data. I'll tell you right now, that does not fly very well for reviewers. Research effort commitment. Again, this is the 51% cutoff. So you want a statement in there that you're going to commit at least 51% research effort toward the project. If you have other commitments in your portfolio that add up to more than 49%, you're going to need to explain what you would change if you were to get the award. You don't have to have 51% available in order to apply. But if you get the award, how are you going to make room for that 51%? And then finally, bibliography or citations. Again, this is not required, so you can skip this if you want, but I don't know that people usually do. But it's encouraged to include the critical citations. You can include them in an abbreviated format as long as there's a unique identifier, so a DOI or something like that. I've seen people use a somewhat smaller font, make sure it's still legible. You don't want to be rejected because you put in, size 2 font or something like that. It has to be readable on the computer screen. Okay, the next slide. These are some points to consider when you're writing your Pioneer Research Strategy essay. Remember, it's still 5 pages. It's short. So given the review process used that I'm going to go over in a minute, be sure that what you write can be easily appreciated and reviewed, by people that are well outside your scientific field. They can review it for exceptional innovation and the potential for unusually broad impact. May be helpful, it's up to you, but it may be helpful to begin your essay with a description of the landscape of the field, current state of the art, or challenges and boundaries that are in place at this point. Provide the proper context for your proposal and why what you're proposing is so innovative and potentially of high impact if you're able to complete the proposed project. You want to ease the reader into the jargon of the field. I would tell you to avoid a lot of very heavy jargon, so ease them in gently. Though no data or experimental detailed plan are required, convince reviewers you've thought deeply about your project. Identify risky aspects of it, how you plan to mitigate these risks, alternative approaches, some of those standard sort of things that apply that allow them to know that you've really thought about this, you've got a plan. You also need to convince the reviewer that the research is going to be performed in a robust and rigorous manner. You're going to validate new approaches. You should, again, provide estimates of the numbers of human or animal that are going to be used if you're using them and why you're using that many. You can cite a power analysis, for example. You want to include that sex is considered as a biological variable if that's appropriate. So the standard robust rigor sorts of things that you should be considering all the time should be in this essay. Okay, next slide. This kind of diagrams out the review process, okay? It's different than an R01. It's a two-phase review cycle. Applications are due, as you know, September 9th, 2026. So don't be late. Don't send them in late. There are no exceptions for late applications. Once all the applications are received and screened by CSR, they will be transmitted to the appropriate scientific review officer. Myself and Becky have really nothing to do with the review. It's a very complicated review, and it's handled solely by our colleagues at the Center for Scientific Review. There's two levels. The first level has all the details in it. So just quickly, the second level is council approval, and that will happen at the end of the first level of review, and that happens in May of 2027, which I know you can hardly get your head wrapped around those dates, but that's when we'll do it, and we take care of that. But the first level of review is complicated. So there are two phases. The first phase, all the applications are sent out to 3 science area experts. You might call them topic experts, and that is dictated by the area of science that you're going to choose and state in your application in the essay portion and on the PHS forms. The details are there in the funding opportunity. Make sure you put those selections in both places. This will happen right away in October to December of 2026. Those science area experts will provide their preliminary comments, critiques. They write quite good critiques I've seen, and some scores that I won't ever see, and unfortunately you don't get to see either. But then all of those applications, and there's a lot of them, okay, are going to transfer to phase 2 of the first level of review. They go to an editorial panel. Those individuals are chosen for their expertise in many different areas. They're not likely to be experts in your area of review, and you need to think about that when you're writing your essay. So those panel members will be given, it depends on how many applications we get. We'll be given a pile of applications. They'll review them, and they'll review the comments from phase 1. They'll select a subset. There's 25 individual applications that will be selected to interview. So very different than an R01. You come to your computer, it's virtual, and you'll do an interview that I'll talk about in a little bit. more detail. The percent of the individuals that make it to that finalist stage and get an interview is completely dictated by the number of applications we receive, and it varies, highly varies. I think last year it was around 6%. So it's very competitive. You know that. But again, if you don't apply, it's zero. So yeah. Okay, so those editorial panel members will interview the applicants, the candidates. They will then discuss and score the applications. And that happens between January to April of 2027, maybe March, it depends. And the interview sessions, they all happen over the same couple days, usually in very late March or early April. We'll see when. And that's how the review's carried out. So it's very different. And you need to think about this as you're writing your essay. Who are you writing it for? Okay, on the next slide, we dive a little deeper into this review process. These are the areas of science that you need to choose. This is for those mail-in reviewers, MAIL, very important reviewers. They will identify their area of expertise, and the scientific review officer is in charge of matching this. So you can list a primary, you have to list a primary, you can list a secondary area of science, and the list is down below. One is chemical biology, that you would abbreviate CB. Two, clinical translational research, CTR. Three, infectious diseases and immunology, IDI. Four is instrumentation and engineering, IE. Five, molecular cellular biology, MCB. Six is neuroscience, NS, which is incredibly broad, right? But neuroscience. Seven is high throughput and integrative biology, HIB. And finally, eight is bioinformatics and computational biology, BCB. So you can only choose from those 8 categories. I think the example in the funding opportunity has a little bit of a typo there, but you'll want to use these 8 categories, okay? Next slide, the phase 1 mail review, again, MAIL. All the Pioneer DP1 applications are reviewed in one special emphasis panel. So those mail-in reviewers in 8 broad scientific areas or topics are recruited by the scientific review officer. Each application goes out to 3 mail reviewers. 2 of those reviewers have expertise in the declared primary scientific area, while 1 of those reviewers has expertise in the declared secondary scientific area. So you're going to want to think about this carefully when you're choosing those areas. They will focus on the specific review criteria for the Pioneer Award. First is the significance and innovation. Second is the investigator's track record of conducting highly innovative research. Remember, you're going to talk about this directly in your essay. And then 3 is so important. There has to be a substantial change in research direction that's usually motivated by a fundamental new insight, maybe preliminary data, maybe a thought that you had that you wanted to try. But it has to be a change. So the next slide goes to phase 2, the editorial panel review. So this editorial panel is a group of scientists with very wide scientific background, and they're known for their broad scientific perspective. So with the input from phase 1 mail reviewers, meaning their detailed critiques and scores, the panel selects about, no, 25, not about, they select 25 finalists they deem to be the most pioneering for a presentation with the review panel that happens in March or April of 2027. They're going to focus again on the same scientific specific review criteria for the Pioneer Award. Again, the significance and innovation, the investigator's track record of conducting highly innovative research, and a substantial change in research direction, motivated perhaps by a fundamental new insight. Finally, the finalist notification will be sent out by the scientific review officer sometime in maybe early March 2027. That's when you will know if you've advanced to be one of those finalists, and you will work with the scientific review officer to set up a time for the interview yeah. The next slide, what does that interview look like? So phase 2 editorial panel review. The interview is a 10-minute presentation by you, the PI finalist. Then there'll be a 10-minute, this is approximate, question and A with the panel, question and answer period. And then finally, the Zoom chat you'll be gone, and there'll be a 10 to 15 minute of a closed panel discussion. We'll discuss the review criteria, your presentation, your essay, and they will score the application. The focus of the panelists are whether is the project really paradigm shifting, and does it have transformative potential? Does the PI have a track record of exceptional scientific creativity? Does the proposal represent a substantially different scientific direction from those already being pursued in the field and in the PI's lab? So what's new and different here? This should not be viewed as a logical extension of ongoing projects. If it is, I promise you, it will not fare well. Okay, the next thing, this just shows again the difference between the review of a regular R01 versus a pioneer review. A regular R01 is a one-phase review process with the same reviewers that review and then discuss. The pioneer is different, two-phase review with mail and then the panel, and the finalists are interviewed, which of course is very different. In a regular R01, the whole panel are subject matter experts, and you can be sure that the people reviewing your area of science really know what you're talking about. They know the area. But for the Pioneer Award, it's different. During the first the mail review, the reviewers are broadly matched expertise with the science area. And the panel review, the second phase, is not assigned by specific topic expertise. You can look on our website under archive and see who has reviewed these in the past if you want. So that could be helpful. It's way over on the left-hand side of the Pioneer page under archive. Okay, the review criteria for an R01 are, as you know, significance, innovation, rigor and feasibility, or the approach. And then investigator and environment are not score driving. It's very different for the pioneer. The review criteria, again, significance and innovation is really important, but the investigator's innovative track record is also very important in score driving. So that's a big difference. And there has to be a substantial new research direction. I feel like I'm beating that one into the ground. Sorry. For the regular R01, the focus tends to be on feasibility in the approach. There's more and more push that it should be on significance and innovation, but we know that feasibility is super important. Whereas for the Pioneer Award, the focus is on exceptional innovation and the PI's track record. Again, convincing reviewers that you can do it and you have a plan. So that is it. Again, we're going to answer questions now, but if you have questions after this webinar, please go to commonfund.nih.gov/pioneer. There's an FAQ link there that is divided up into different areas of the application review, etc., that I promise you will have a lot of information. There's an application guide, and we even have some sample applications on the website. They're successful application, the examples. We don't have a lot, and they're probably not from your scientific area, but it gives you an idea of what has been successful in the past. If you have questions afterwards, you can email me at pioneerawards@mail.nih.gov, and I'm happy to talk to you, answer questions, etc. There will be a recording of this webinar and all the mistakes I've made talking and the slides, and that'll be posted on our website sometime in about the next week. So you can look there to try to, if you want to go back and listen to anything again, you can, and the slides will be there. Okay, so now we're going to answer questions, and Becky is going to moderate this, and I'm going to try to answer them.
All right. What are the major differences between the NIH DP1 and DP2 activity codes? Most importantly, eligibility to apply, intended career stage for and intended career stage for the DP1 applicants and DP2 applicants.
That's a good question, and one that I see a lot, right? The DP1 is the pioneer, as you know, and we've been talking about. The DP2, as Becky referenced, is the new innovator award. So the big difference is that new part, okay? For the DP2, you must have early stage investigator status. So that means you're generally within 10 years of your terminal degree or the end of your clinical training, and you have not yet received a substantial independent NIH award yet. So if you have ESI status, I would encourage you to apply to the DP2. The success rate is far better. We make more of those applications or more of those awards, so the success rate's better. But let's see, that's the eligibility. But the intended career stage for DP1, you can be anything for a DP1. I'll be honest, I don't think I've ever seen certainly a postdoc fare well in review. You need a established track record of creativity, and I I think it's a hard argument to make when you're very early stage in your career. That you have that track record. So for the DP1, I've seen assistant professors apply, certainly, and we give a lot of awards to associate professors and full professors. Obviously, if you're not in an academic environment, your title will be different, but I think you know what I mean. For the intended career stage for a DP2, you have to have an independent position to apply. So you usually cannot apply as a postdoc. You can, if you have a job lined up for the following September. And we have a similar webinar on our website we did last week. It's already posted. So if that's what you're interested, if you have ESI status, you might think about taking a look at that for the DP2. Did I answer both parts of the question, Becky?
Yes, and I will
Okay.
say that, other NIH institutes and centers use these activity codes, and they might use them in a slightly different way.
Yes.
Because I do know, like, there were some that
Yes.
used the DP1 and actually it was for early stage investigators. So,
Yes. Yes.
but just take a look at our funding opportunity. Those are the eligibility requirements. Those are the rules that you need to
Yeah.
follow, regardless of what other institutes or
Yeah.
centers have done.
So one of the things I forgot to say, and it's so important, is our best advice we could ever give you. We know it's not fun, but it's to read that funding opportunity. We know that it's got a lot of template sort of legalese language in there, but trust me, everything you really need is in that funding opportunity.
All right. I guess this is a similar line of question. The opportunity states that this is intended for all stage PIs, but from the previous awardees, it looks like most of them are not early stage PIs. So how is the
Yeah.
career stage structured in the peer review procedure?
Well, again, that's really driven by the fact that reviewers need to evaluate your track record and your exceptional creativity in the past, right? So if you are, I don't want to say older, if you're further along in your career, you just probably have more information than certainly a postdoc and maybe even an assistant professor. So it's again not dictated to any one career stage, but usually investigators that have been around a little bit longer have more of a track record and are more likely to be evaluated more positively in that area.
All right. There are 8 research areas to choose from, so the science
Mhm.
areas,
Yeah.
and 8 awards per year. Is it 1 award per research area?
Oh, that's interesting. I never thought of that before. Absolutely not. No. So you're right. We make 7 or 8 awards every year. It depends on our budget. But no, it doesn't track at all to the science areas, not at all. That is strictly for the scientific review officer and their assignment of reviewers to the applications.
Right. How different must a new research direction be? Is a change in
Yeah.
subfields or biological models, for instance, cardiac to liver cells, sufficient, or are reviewers looking for a major leap across completely different disciplines?
Yeah, this is the hardest thing to evaluate, and I absolutely cannot define it. It's up to you to convince reviewers. So I would advise you when you have people read your essay that you tell them this is one of the most important review criteria, and did they believe that it's a difference for you? So, but I what I can say is that if you're answering close to the same question but you're just bringing in a new model system, for example, they are likely not to see that as a huge change in research direction. They might if it opens up different questions that you're going to be asking. Sure, absolutely. Or you're establishing something new that gives you new abilities, maybe. But if it's the exact same question you've been working on for the past, I don't know, 5 or 10 years, it will be uh, a hard time convincing reviewers. Um, what was the second part of that?
Uh,
Um,
uh, well, just, are they looking for major leaps across completely different?
oh, yeah. So it doesn't have to be a complete change, meaning, you're a cell biologist and now you're going to completely switch to, I don't know, making this up, structural biology, and you're going to establish everything in your lab and do it on your own. Um, that's a bit extreme. So I don't think they would require that. But if, again, I think it's most important of what are the questions that you're answering and how is this different from what you've done before?
All right. Do applications need to be submitted through our university's grant office, or can investigators apply directly?
No, it absolutely has to go through the grants office. Yeah, the standard ERA Commons ways to do it. So you want to talk to your grants office first at your university or research institution and get that started.
All right. What is the definition of a history of high innovation? Is this like done via NIH grants publications?
It could be for sure. Yeah, it could be publications. How important have your past publications been? What areas have you opened up by answering really hard questions in the past? Could also be patents. It could be past funding. All of these things could weigh into that. And again, reviews are human. So they're going to look at these things, but they're going to have their own individual opinions. So, if you have 2 papers and you've had one grant, they might be like, I'm not sure this person's ready. And depending on who they are, they may not, they may value different levels of publications differently. I can't answer that. But they'll want to see a track record, that's been maintained over a fair amount of time and that's really made a difference. I don't think they look at things like H values and all of that, but you have the opportunity in the BioSketch to annotate which papers you think have been the most important and kind of talk about them a little bit, what they've brought to the scientific field. And you should use that to try to help make that case that what you've done has been important in the past.
All right. What is the measure of change in direction? Is it defined by your previous grants, publications, or conference abstracts?
I don't know about conference abstracts, but definitely publications and grants. If you have funding in that area of research already, I think you'd have a really hard time convincing reviewers it was a new area. Same with publications. So if you've published on an idea and you have any data on it, that could be a negative. If they come away saying this person's already working on this, they should do an R01. Um, it should be something that's really new to you. Again, you can include a little bit of preliminary data. It's only 5 pages. You can't do much, right? But if you load it up with a bunch of preliminary data to establish feasibility, they're going to say, well, this person's already doing this. They should apply for an R01. So you're going to want to say in your essay, again, that one area, why this is not an R01, why this is a pioneer, why this is not a traditional area of funding. But yeah, they're gonna look at all of that, I would say.
Okay. Another question. Are there specific word restrictions for each heading or subsection?
No, I don't think so, but I wouldn't change it up too much. Remember that reviewers are going to be looking for those subheadings. So I would, you could add some things, but I would include everything we request. That I might need a little more detail on that, but think about the reviewer who has a bunch of these in front of them. They're not supposed to compare between, but they're used to looking for the same elements in each essay. And if you leave something out, that won't be good. If you change it in a way that makes it sort of not fit with what they've been looking for all along to evaluate using the criteria they're supposed to use, that could be a problem. So I would be a little gentle with how much you're going to change those areas. You could add extra things if you think it makes sense, but I wouldn't delete any of those areas.
All right. There's a request to clarify the 51% research effort. Does it include just research, or does it also include your total job, like for teaching,
It,
service, other activities?
it is just research. That's why it's research effort. It's not total effort. So yeah, you don't include your teaching, administrative duties, clinical, all of that. No, that doesn't count. I'm talking about however much time you have for research. If you only have 50% time research, then it would be 51% of that 50%. So, you can do the math. It's what, 25.5, I don't know, percent from your total effort. But we don't need that level of detail. You need to just attest that you will do 51% of your research effort. Yeah.
What would you suggest to someone who is not yet affiliated with an institution? There could be places where I could choose to work. How would you address that?
I think I might need to have a little bit more detail on that one. But if what you're saying is you are a postdoc looking for a job, you're going to need that job before you apply, or that job should start by September 2027. You should work with that new institution's grants office to apply. If you're talking about the fact that you might be leaving where you are now, that's a little different. There's too many fuzzy things there. I'm not sure that I can give you the right advice. So I would tell you to email me that question with more specifics, or we can always set up a time to talk about it if you'd like.
All right. What will be asked in the interview?
Well, it's a standard scientific short talk. So you're going to present your case for the project in the first 10 minutes. And then they may ask you questions that came up from the male reviewers. They may ask you their own questions. They may ask you to talk about how this is a change. They might challenge you on that because, as I said many times during this hour, that's a very difficult thing to judge, and there may be disagreements between the reviewers. So I think anything is wide open. They can ask you whatever they want, I think within reason, but I've never seen anything stray outside the science. And I often see them ask, how is this a change?
Right. NIH will potentially cap how many NIH grants one PI can have concurrently. Does the Pioneer Award, is it subject to this limitation? For example, if one PI has two R01s, can you still apply for this award?
Okay, so that is guidance or a new um, rule, if you will, that is not in effect yet. It's something that's being talked about. So I don't really have a very clear answer for you on that at this point. But what I would say is that, yes, this is a major independent research award. And if there are policies that come out at some point, then it would be subject to that. The other thing is you need to have the percent effort available that we've already talked about. So you make sure you have that. Um, yeah, and make sure that there's no overlap. I'm surprised no one asked that yet, but the application cannot overlap with anything you already have funded, and you cannot put in more than one application at a time that would be in review at the same time with overlapping scientific aims. So it really has to stand apart. It also will count for one of your 6 PI applications per calendar year, that rule that went into effect in January.
In your experience, what percentage of awards have preliminary data, even though such data are not required?
Well, I haven't read every single one, but close to 100%. It's very rare that people don't have at least a little bit of preliminary data in there, but it's absolutely not required. And really, if you have a compelling question and a project, I would love to see more applications come in without any preliminary data. It's not really 100%, but it's probably closer to 90. I don't know an exact answer though.
Is the current and pending form part of this submission?
Oh,
I,
other supports?
I think that's what they mean. It's other
Yeah.
support.
Yeah, yes. And again, look at the funding opportunity. It will have that information in it.
How are model systems viewed by the review process?
That's really vague. I think that, we're fine with whatever model system makes sense to answer the questions that are being posed. There are no limits. There are no animal models, for example, that are off limits. So I think that's what they mean.
I I I think so too. We
Mhm.
just to make sure you justify whatever you're using,
Yes.
justify it well.
Yes, not just how many, but why that model system and why you can't use, I don't know, human subjects. Sometimes that's very easy, but why you can't use an in vitro model. Just talk about that in the justification part. That's not in the 5-page essay, so you should have a little bit of room for that.
Is there a recommended length for each of the sections in the research strategy essay?
No. No, I mean, the short ones are super short, right? They're a sentence. Um, the science area is a few letters. So, those are easy, but you just have to make it fit within the 5 pages.
All right. Can you say how many awards are typically made a year?
Yeah, there's usually 7 or 8 awards every year. You can, again, go on our website under funded research and you could see, how many every year has gone through and who those individuals are and where they are and the titles of their proposals. And that's linked to NIH reporters. You can actually look at their abstracts. Yeah.
All right. My guess is more interested in success rate. It's probably what, yeah.
Success rate is not good. But again, if you don't apply, it's zero. So, but the success rate is, I don't know. We don't have
4%.
numbers. It might even be less than that. We don't have numbers yet for this year. And again, that's driven by how many applications we get, which we can never predict in advance. But
Can you,
maybe
oh,
four, maybe
okay.
three. I don't know.
Can you say a bit more about the providers of the letters of reference? Would
Oh,
past
yeah.
or current
Yeah.
collaborators be okay?
Yeah, this is really important who you choose to write your letters. You want established scientists in the field, people that know you very well, and you want people that can talk about you, that can talk about what you've done in the past, your past research, why it's important. You do not want people that would appear to benefit if you get this award, right? If it's a collaborator on your project, that would be a very bad idea because if you get the award, they're going to benefit. If it's your department chair, that would be a very bad idea because they will benefit if you get this award. So people that would have no possible benefit of this new project being funded. It could be past collaborators, sure, absolutely. They're likely to know you very well. It could even be previous mentors or something like that, but it doesn't have to be. It can really be a mix of different people, but just make sure they know you well, they know the research area well, and they can speak to your creativity and your track record. And maybe even if you have time to communicate the details of your project to them, they don't have to write about the project, but it wouldn't hurt to have them state how it's a change for you. That's totally up to you what you want them to ask to write about. Remember, this is a letter of reference. You don't get to see it. They are going to submit it for you. The details, again, are in the funding opportunity. They do it through the ERA Commons site, so they need to know your ERA, your ID, the little contraction of your name, usually in some way. Depends on how long your name is, but that your ID, they need to know that, and they need the RFA number in order to submit. You will get an email when they submit. If they need to put in an amended, make a change or something, they can do that. But you will get notification that they've done it or not. It's up to you to make sure you have three and only three of those submitted. If you don't, it may or may not be reviewed. But I promise you, if you don't have three letters, it's going to work against you. And they have to be submitted by the application due date, September 9th.
Okay. Continuing on with the letters of reference, should the letter focus on the innovation and track record of the PI? And what about the research direction and plan itself, given
Right.
that there's not much detail yet?
Yeah, well, you don't want them to be explaining your project to the reviewers. That would not be a good idea. But I've seen it work well both ways. Sometimes they only talk about your past, what you've done in the past, your track record, how they know you, how long they've known you, and their opinions. Sometimes they talk a little bit about the new project. Either one can work. I would be careful that you do not feed them information that then comes through that all three of your reference letters have similar language in them. That would be a really bad sign for the reviewers reading things. So be careful what you give them to write about. So if you spoon feed your letter writers, this is what my proposal is going to do, and they choose to take that verbatim, and then your letters are similar, that would be really bad. So it depends on who you're asking to write and how they know you of what they should discuss. But any of those areas are fair game. I think I've often seen it so they don't really talk about the proposed project. Um, but it doesn't mean it would be bad if they did.
Okay. Could you please um, could you please comment a little bit more on the letters? What is expected, how important they are in the final decision?
Very important, right? Because they are describing who you are and they're talking about your track record. They're supposed to be a somewhat independent evaluation of what you've done in the past, what your track record looks like, how creative you are, etc. So they're very important. The reviewers look at them closely. We often hear them discuss them in the discussion part of the finalist interview. They're not going to say it in front of you, the interviewee, but oftentimes they'll say, well, they had two good letters and one was kind of lukewarm. Or they had three letters all stating how spectacular this PI is. So they're very important. And again, as I mentioned before, I think you can focus them, you can have them choose to focus in any way that you wish.
Right. Is it necessary to name specific collaborators, or is it sufficient to mention topic areas where expertise will be sought?
I think if you don't have specific people named, that might not be so good. If you just say, I'm going to get somebody to help me with this technique, that would indicate to the reviewers that maybe you haven't thought through it all that clearly. So you'd probably already want to be talking to that person and have at least a little bit of a plan in place to deal with what you're proposing, right? You're not an expert in the area. You go to the collaborator and they say, wait a minute, you can't do it this way. You want that knowledge before you write your essay and apply, right? So I wouldn't really say to be named in my essay. I would like to see names and people. Again, you don't need letters of support from them. You don't need specific commitments of time or any of that, but reviewers need to know that you have that plan and you've thought it through clearly to the point where you have people identified.
Okay. You emphasize that all areas of science are eligible for this award. With that
Mhm.
in mind, can you provide some context or information about why the behavioral and social science area code was removed from this year's NOFO?
No, not really. That was a change that was outside our control, but we remain firm in that we invite all science within the NIH mission space. So unfortunately, you'll have to choose a different area of science, but no, that is still welcome. You're welcome to apply in that area.
All right. This is a single PI application, but can you include new co-investigators or collaborators and include
Yes.
their biosketch and letter of support as part of
No.
establishing feasibility?
Yes and no. Yes, you include their names, but no to all those extra documents, right? No bio sketches. That was covered in the slides up above. Maybe you logged in late. No bio sketches and no letters of support. There cannot be letters of support at all with this application. So no, but yes, you want to include their names. You can state who they are, where they are, and what they'll bring to the project. You put that in the essay. You should also list their name and institution in the PHS assignment form. And really, that inclusion is just to make sure that the SROs have that information easily available so they don't ask that person to review the proposal. Because what'll happen is they'll assign it to your collaborator by accident. They read it and realize that close to the last minute, I can't review this, we're collaborating. And then that really throws a wrench in things for the SRO. So that's the reason, not just to convince reviewers that it's the right person, but also put them in the PHS assignment form.
All right. So how important is it to describe the key collaborators? And is there an ideal number of co-investigators?
I definitely don't have an ideal number for you. But yes, you will want to explain who they are and what they're going to do. And usually it's for some sort of evidence that this new direction you're going into, that you have help because it's an area that's outside your expertise. So you have help and these are the people that will provide that expertise and will help you. And you're going to experts. You're not going to try to wing it.
Right. And is there a limit before it's considered team science? I
Uh,
guess concern about that
yeah.
person-centric.
Yeah, there's no limit, but I think that reviewers could be concerned about that if there were so many collaborators that it doesn't seem like you're the intellectual driver of the project. That would be a concern. And if that's the case for your project, maybe this isn't the right application. We have another program. When Becky was talking about the 4 programs in the beginning of the webinar, it's called the Transformative Research Award that's open to either individual PIs or it could be an MPI, a multi-PI application. So if you think that's a concern, look at that funding opportunity perhaps instead of this one. And we had a webinar on that last week. I don't think it's posted yet, but it will be soon. But that funding opportunity is out. The application due date's about a week earlier than this one, so it's around the same time. It's very similar success rates, but have a look at that just in case. So that's the same advice I would give somebody that does not feel like they can make the case that it's a change in research direction. If it's still high risk, high reward, take a look at the Transformative Research Award instead. So if you go to our website, the first part of what's on the screen, commonfund.nih.gov, and look at our programs, you can find the HRHR program, and then you can look at all 4 awards under that.
All right. Are illustrations and figures of concept allowed in the application?
Yes, absolutely. We see them all the time in the 5-page research essay. They have to fit within the page limit, but yes, see them all the time.
This doesn't have a question, but I recently graduated with an MS in data science and do not have a PhD yet, but I do have extensive research experience. So my guess is they're asking about eligibility.
Yeah, well, you could apply, but what I would challenge you with is, does it make sense at your stage in your career that reviewers are going to be able to evaluate what you've done in the past and see an extensive track record of creativity and innovation and impact? You say you have extensive research experience, so maybe you do. We all know that different areas of science or different, I don't know, disciplines are different that way. So that's up to you. You are eligible to apply, assuming again that whatever institution you're at will submit the application on your behalf. There are many institutions that will not submit a large for a large award like this unless you have some dedicated research, space, time, money, etc. So you'll want to talk to your institution. If they would submit an R01 for you, then you could try, yes.
All right. How should applicants choose the 3 reference letter writers? Are they people who know the applicant's creativity well, experts in the proposed field, or people who can comment on the new direction?
Yes. They don't need to be experts in the proposed field though, but they need to be able to comment on your past creativity, et cetera, et cetera. And maybe they can comment on how it's a new research direction for you. I don't think you'd need all 3 to be able to state that, but yeah, they need to know you well.
Right. Could a scientific component of the DP1 application, but not exactly overlapping, be submitted as an R01 during the year that the DP1 is being reviewed?
Well, that question kind of contradicts it in the middle there. If it's overlapping scientifically, then no. If it's related scientifically, it could be. But if it's at all, if someone looks at it and says these are the same experiments, then no. This is the standard NIH policy. This is nothing special. So, if you have an R01 application in that's covering a certain set of experiments, whatever the hypothesis is, etc. You can't have another R01 with the same set of experiments proposed, right? So you can't have the same science reviewed at the same time by two different panels. So, keep that in mind.
Right. How can reviewers be convinced that collaborators will perform the roles described in your application, given that letters of support are not allowed?
They take your word for it. So, yeah, that's all.
All right. Do letters need to be from US-based scientists?
The letters of reference,
I
absolutely
think
not. No, no, they do not need to be. The application must be from a US institution. That's the only limit we have at this point. But no, a reference letter, there should be no bias with respect to where it came from inside the US or not.
um, how much weight's given to the investigator's track record of innovation compared with the innovation and potential impact of the proposed research? For example, can a highly innovative proposal remain competitive if the applicant has a strong but relatively shorter track record of innovation?
Well, there are three review criteria, and we do not tell the reviewers to weight one heavier than the other. One of them is your track record. One of them is the change in research direction. One of them is the significance and importance of the problem. I would say that probably they're weighted fairly equally, but as in any review, if one of them comes out really not so great, that can push the score down. So it's not like we have a mathematical formula for that. If they think that, for example, it's not a change in research direction, but they acknowledge that you have a fantastic track record and the science would be great, but it's not a change, it's not going to do well. So I guess what I'm saying is a negative evaluation of one of those criterion is that would drive the score in that case. The same as with an R01 review, unfortunately. Doesn't average out, if you have a one, and I don't know, four, it doesn't mean you get a two, right? Um, the four can drive it down.
Right. Is a secondary area selection required since one reviewer will be from that secondary area?
I think it's a good idea, unless you want uh, your third reviewer to be somebody way, way, way outside your field. You probably don't want that. So again, I would follow the directions in the funding opportunity. Yes.
Right. Does the DP1 require a letter of intent?
No, no. It's a new rule now. No NIH applications require a letter of intent anymore. So no, absolutely not. It never has actually, the DP1.
All right. Um, could you do a pilot study with your idea while the grant is in process? And how would that be viewed by the male reviewers?
Well, they're not going to know about it. You can, of course, work on this in the background after you submit your application in September 9th, right? You can do as much or as little as you want in this area. Um, it they're not gonna, you cannot put in any post-submission materials. If something happened and you had a paper published in that area and they found it, they'd probably say, hey, wait a minute, this person's already working on this, is not a change. But you can do whatever you want, really.
All right. There's another repeat question about our postdocs eligible. I think we've answered that numerous times. Let's see.
Somebody has their hand up. I'm sorry, we don't even have the ability to unmute you. Please put your questions in the Q&A box.
All right. Anything else? Give them a second to try to find that.
Is there anything in the chat?
I went through those already.
Okay, good. Oh, right, okay. We can hang while the person who has their hand up can type in the Q&A box.
Well, I can, here's an older question before. How do review panels distinguish between a project that is appropriately high risk versus one that is viewed as simply unfeasible or lacking sufficient scientific grounding?
Oh yeah, you don't want a completely unfeasible project. So, how you can do that, you could have some preliminary data in there that could address things that are particularly high risk, or you could have a very good plan. The second might be easier than the first since you probably aren't really working on this yet. It's still probably in the idea and planning stage, right? So that's probably the best way to handle that, I would say.
All right. What if interviewers ask if you have been doing preliminary studies since the application was submitted?
Well, if you get to the interview stage and they ask you that, sure, you can answer it, of course. If as long as it's not, a paper that you've published or something that really shows you've already been working on it, it's fine.
Right. How many publications are the minimum based on your experience?
You
So
mean on
this,
your track record?
yeah,
I
and
have,
they're,
I, yeah, that I have no idea. I don't think I've ever looked at how many are a minimum. I think it'd be rare if you didn't have the answer wasn't many, right? Because if you have a track record, you have publications that attest that establish that track record. So if you only have a handful of papers, my guess is that you should look at whether or not this is the right fit for you for your track record. Um, yeah.
and then they ask about differentiating between first or middle authorship or senior authorship.
Oh, you mean like numbers wise, do you think?
I I guess um I think reviewers are going to want to see that your own research lab, so with
Yeah,
you as a
yeah,
senior author, are
yeah,
producing research that's creative and innovative and high impact.
absolutely.
So,
Yes. If you don't have any senior author papers yet, that would be, at least in most fields that I know well, that would not fare well, I think. So that probably means you're too early in your career to think about this as the right option for you.
all right. For applicants who advance to the interview stage, what are the most common pitfalls or areas where highly scored written applications tend to stumble during the live Q&A?
Um, well, it's often again in that area that is a change of research area for the PI because the editorial panel will have planned questions that they want to ask the applicants during that time. And I think usually they have them pretty well planned out. And it's very common to see that as a question. It's like, how would you say this is a change in your research direction? And then you would talk about it. They might say, but I don't know, I'm making this up. But so and so, or probably wouldn't call it a name, but other labs have been working in this area for quite a while. What is it that you're talking about that's really that different or that innovative compared to what's been out there before? Why is this innovative? So things like that, usually things to clarify elements around the review criteria. That's what I'm used to seeing.
All right. If an investigator, I think we've answered this. If you have two applications at one time, they need to be scientifically distinct.
Yes, yes.
Okay. The Pioneer Award requires the proposed research to be a major departure from the PI's current work. For
Mhm.
established investigators with broad multidisciplinary portfolios, how is a major departure evaluated by the review panel?
Yeah, I know that's one of the hard things that you're going to need to um, clarify for reviewers. You just need to justify it. I don't have a metric. I can't say, this is the cell biology area that I've never published in the Journal of Cell Biology, therefore it's a change. Things like that won't work. But talk about how it's different. Talk about how you're not established in that field. I mean, if you do something incredibly different, like you've been working on, I don't know, I'll make this up, arthritis or joint replacement, something around that for your whole career. Now you're working on cancer. That's a no-brainer, right? Even if it's bone cancer, probably. It's something completely different. So really look at the questions that you're asking in your previous work versus this new proposal. They need to be different and not highly linked.
By definition, high-risk research has a high probability of failure. How explicitly should applicants discuss alternative strategies or pivot points in the essay without undermining confidence in their primary approach?
So you have to be quite explicit. What are the alternatives? This is a way to convince the reviewers that you've thought about it very seriously. Identify the risks, talk about how you're going to mitigate them. I'm collaborating with so and so because I don't have a lot of experience with that technology, and they will be helpful in X, Y, and Z. Um, make it very clear that you've thought about it really hard and you know what the problems are going to be and you've got a plan, because the last thing you want is the reviewers to say, well, the PI didn't even consider this, that this part is hard and that nobody's ever done this part before. That would, you probably wouldn't do well.
All right. If an investigator's track record is a significant factor in the selection process, what's the rationale for making researchers at all career stages eligible to apply rather than limiting eligibility to senior academic levels?
Well, because there's no point in limiting things. It doesn't mean that a more junior person cannot have a significant track record. Again, we don't have a cutoff for the number of papers or et cetera, et cetera. And an ESI level, like assistant professor, is absolutely invited to apply. Um, I would say that a postdoc or somebody that does not have an independent research position probably can't apply. Their university or research institution wouldn't even agree to put in the application for them. Um, so I, I, I don't know. I think that answers the question. Did you want to add to that, Becky? Maybe I'm missing something.
Um, to say that people have a lot of different and unique paths to get to where they are, and they
Mhm.
may have different types of evidence in their track record of how they were creative.
True.
And so we wouldn't limit that to just kind of the traditional academic bin of how people perform.
Yeah, agreed.
All right. Would the change of research direction be required only for the PI or as co-investigators as well?
Only for the PI. Remember, this is a single PI application. You're the only one being evaluated. Those co-Is are not going to be identified as co-Is. You're not going to have their bio sketches or anything that's substantial about them. This is about you as the applicant.
Right.
That said, if the reviewers are concerned that too much of the project is really not yours, that could be an issue. If they think it belongs more to your co-Is than you, that could be a problem.
How does a history of clinical innovation versus research innovation versus management of large national studies, which are not necessarily innovative, but with lots of longitudinal research experience, how are they rated by reviewers?
Oh boy, that's a lot. I would say that for this review, there's really no major difference, like clinical innovation over research innovation. one is not prioritized over the other. The management of a large study, I think you said large national study, that's a little different. That might be viewed a little bit differently. And if this is not a large national study that needs to be managed, I'm not sure that it would be taken with the same weight as the clinical or research innovation. So it sort of depends on what you're proposing. You can be proposing a clinical trial. If you've never run one before, that could be a change in your research direction, but you would want to be able to convince reviewers that you've either gathered the expertise for that from collaborators or other people at your institution, whatever. I don't think that research versus clinical, I don't think there's any weight of one over the other. For us, certainly not. For reviewers, you would just need to convince them that, you can do it. That's all.
Is a vision statement required?
No, we don't have that as part of the application. You can talk about your vision in the essay, but we don't have anything that's formally required that's called a vision statement.
All right, would a track record of having more patents than publications be seen as a negative?
I don't think so. I mean, it really depends on the science area that you're talking about. Different fields, innovation is measured more with patents than perhaps papers, right? So, that could be a real positive, but I don't think it would be a negative. It really just depends on what you're proposing.
How important is translational science and/or community engagement in the review scoring process?
Again, it really just depends on what the proposal is. Many things, yes, translational importance would matter, but we are also very interested in basic science research. So either could be viewed equally well. And I think if you look at our past awards, we have awards in both areas. So I don't think we do not have a priority of one over the other. I'm not saying reviewers might not. Reviewers might say, this is great, but I don't see any clinical implications. So again, it depends on the science you're proposing. If that is something that would make sense and you don't have it, that could be a problem.
All right. I guess maybe this is one of the last questions. Given that detailed itemized budgets are not submitted, how should applicants best describe their resource needs and planned expenditures within the narrative to assure reviewers that the project is appropriately scaled?
Well, you're right, you don't need a detailed budget. I think these reviewers are pretty experienced and they will know if how much you're proposing is possible within the 5-year period of the award and for that amount of money. So I think you do need to be cognizant that you're not promising too much, because I've seen reviewers many times saying this person can't do this in 5 years. It's just not possible. For some of our other initiatives, we require a timeline that's not required here. If you want to put that in to convince people that indeed you can do this in the amount of time, that's fine. You can add it, but you don't have to. Yeah.
All right.
I see
Any
one that
last? Oh,
popped up in the chat. It says, does the PI have to be an independent researcher with a lab? And again, I point you back to, yes, you need an independent research position, but the way that we take evidence of that is that your institution will submit the application for you. It's an R01 equivalent with respect to that. So again, if you're a postdoc, or a student, my guess is that your institution will not submit, an R01 or an R01 equivalent for you. So yeah, you need to have resources to do the project.
yes, it's important to note that the NIH funds and supports institutions, not individuals.
Yes.
So you need to have an institution providing or being willing to submit your application on your behalf.
This is a little different in that the pioneer, you are very much one of the review criterion. So that is very, very different than, an R01, but you need to be set up for success that way.
Yep.
Working out of a garage doesn't work.
Yep. So the review criteria they're focused on person-centric kind of qualifications, but it's still a research project grant and have to follow all the regular policies and regulations. One more question popped up and we're at time. Oh, okay. Yes. So I think that's it. But as a reminder, if you do have questions that we weren't able to answer, please contact us at pioneerawards@mail.nih.gov and we will get back to you. And this webinar and the recording and the slides will be posted on our website in about a week.
Okay. Thank you, everybody. And again, reach out to me. I'm happy to answer questions if I can. Bye.
Okay. Thank you.